Welcome back. This is Jeff Hix, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hix, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. For this week's episode, I came across this article recently about sloths, ancient sloths. Apparently there were some the size of elephants that roamed America before they abruptly vanished, apparently due to human intervention. But fascinating story here on the massive Megatherium sloths, which once stood apparently as large as Asian elephants. They lived in caves and apparently left piles of poop that fossilized into coprolites. But was looking at this article and it reminded me there was a folder that I had come across recently in the Strange As It Seems archives entitled Ancient Animals. So I thought, let's take a look into that. So for this week's episode, we'll dive into the folder Ancient Animals here at Strange As It Seems. So the question we'll kick off with today that we'll answer at the end of the episode is, what ancient animal or what dinosaur could jump higher than a house? I'll give the answer at the end of today's episode. But we'll kick off first with, looks like Elsie Hix had run this Strange As It Seems comic strip back in 1951 that apparently Nebraska had produced fossil skeletons of the largest prehistoric elephant, camel, and hog. Here's a letter corroborating that from the University of Nebraska, written to John Hix way back in 1939, that some gigantic fossilized animal skeletons which the University of Nebraska has on display. World's largest skeleton of a prehistoric elephant, the world's largest skeleton of a prehistoric camel, and the world's largest skeleton of a prehistoric hog, all located in Nebraska. And next up from the archives, we have a turtle with horns, a prehistoric tortoise that was found in Patagonia, South America, which had horns measuring 2 feet from tip to tip. Ancient tortoise. And another ancient animal with amazing horns from 500,000 years ago, the super bison. Latifrons grew horns 80 inches from tip to tip, nearly 7 feet long. And another ancient animal, looks kind of like an ancient armadillo here, the Eleutherocercis, prehistoric South American animal. 10 feet long, had heavy armor, a war club tail studded with knobs, but ate vegetables. A big bluff was the Eleutherocercis, a 10-foot-long animal of the ancient Glyptodont family of South America. With an appearance as terrifying as its name, an armadillo-like creature roamed South America about 40 million years ago, covered its tail in a war club studded with horny knobs. From 1937, 1938, Strange As It Seems. Here's also a full skeleton of the 40 million year ago fossil skeleton of the Eleutherocercis from the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. What do you call Katy Perry in a sandbox? An archaeologist. And this fascinating ancient animal, which they had an unlabeled skull apparently at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. They didn't know what it was and had just been recently identified here, looks like in this comic strip from 1957, and a letter from the Department of Zoology that it was a blue buck, a type of South African antelope, which became extinct about 1799, killed off by white hunters. An unlabeled skull had just been identified, and here's some black and white photographs of apparently the only blue buck skull in existence in the world. Strange As It Seems. And here's another comic strip back in the time of Ernest Hix in the late 1940s, The Mystery Bone, kept in Stanion Church, Northants, England. This bone was reputed to be the rib of a giant cow. According to legend, this giant cow was supposed to supply milk for the whole village, but an old witch gave her a sieve, and the cow, failing to fill it, broke her heart and died. No one knows what the bone is really a part of, maybe a whale, or how long it had been there, yet so strong is custom and tradition that it remains carefully stored in the church. Strange As It Seems. Why did the Tyrannosaurus Rex cross the road? Yeah, the chicken hadn't evolved yet. And another Strange As It Seems, right as the comic strip was transitioning from Ernest to Elsie shortly after Ernest had died in a plane crash. But here's the giant mastodon tooth dredged from the ocean floor off the Ambrose lightship, weighed 3 3/4 pounds and measured 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches, a giant mastodon tooth found at the bottom of the ocean. And of course, it wouldn't be a file about ancient animals if we weren't also talking about the dinosaurs. Of course, the Brontosaurus, a dinosaur that weighed nearly 40 tons and his brain weighed only 1 pound, the Brontosaurus. And what do you call a dinosaur with an extensive vocabulary? A thesaurus. And while we tend to think of the dinosaurs as the largest creatures that ever roamed the earth, here's the fact from John Hix that from 1944 that many of us know, but might have even forgotten. But the largest of the prehistoric dinosaurs weighed only 1/3 as much as the blue whale of today. Fascinating. And if you've ever visited the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. and seen the skeleton of the dinosaur Diplodocus, that huge skeleton there, apparently, and this is corroborated by a letter to my grandma Elsie in 1955, and she published this fact in 1955, and strange as it seems, that skeleton took the work of 3 trained preparators 7 years to chip that skeleton out of the rock. And another fascinating ancient animal, the duck-billed dinosaur, apparently had more than 2,000 separate teeth in its upper jaw alone. The duck-billed dinosaur. What do you call a blind dinosaur? Do you think he saw us? And the world's greatest bonehead. How about this one? I don't even know if I'm going to try to pronounce this, but a Pachycephalosaurus. How's that? A dinosaur had 9 inches of solid bone above its brain. No other animal in all creation had such a skull as the Pachycephalosaurus, the world's greatest bonehead. And here's a story sent in from Ekalaka, Montana, about how many dinosaur bones can be found in this part of the country. They're so commonplace that apparently people use them for doorsteps and for rocks in their rock gardens. And we got quite a bit of information here from Ekalaka, Montana, including the Pachycephalosaurus we were just talking about, a picture, a black and white photograph of one of those skulls found here, as well as a Triceratops and another dinosaur bone found. And apparently there is glamour and opportunity in Carter County, Montana. Got a whole brochure here from March 1949 of all the goings-ons in Carter County, Montana. And of course, a letter from the Carter County Museum, as well as the Chamber of Commerce from Ekalaka, Montana. Fascinating place, full of ancient animals and skeletons. And the answer to the question at the top of the episode, what kind of dinosaur could jump higher than a house? The answer? All of them. Houses can't jump. And that does it for this week's episode. It was a small folder about ancient animals. If you like content like this, about the strange and unusual, hit the bell, subscribe, like, follow, make a comment. Would love to hear from you, and we'll see you next week with another episode here at Strange as It Seems.